Christians, like Jesus is all about the underdog and supporting people, and so there's a good heart. There's a part of the motive for this is, yeah, man, we want to support people who are being oppressed. But then they've layered this on with this self-loathing. We're all white colonialists. We're guilty of this. We hate ourselves. We're ashamed of our culture, even though we're Christian. And then they are it's like they're primed by what they've been brought up with to believe this stuff. It's really concerning because it's just not true. That's the thing. I go, it's not true, man. And we should value the truth.
Yemini for Rebel News at the Church and State Summit here in Brisbane, and today I'm excited to actually be meeting somebody for the first time that I've in the last couple of months looked up to a little bit. And I know, I know I look up to most of the world from down here.
Yeah.
But
don't put yourself down, mate. Gravity's already done that for you. Yeah.
But you have inspired me a lot because obviously around the world we witnessed what happened to you in Sydney. Maybe start there, tell us what happened, and then tell us what you've been doing.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, likewise there. I admire you and the work you've done. It's fantastic, and I'm delighted to meet you. It's fantastic. So look, on October the 9th, there was a protest, a pro-Palestinian protest in Sydney. It started outside Town Hall next to the cathedral, and I'm sure people know that the police in Sydney had told the Jewish community to stay away from that. And I knew my brother had become a Muslim. I know Islam from the inside, and I've been to these protests before. I knew the kind of hatred they'd be spewing, and I thought, man, it's 2 days since October 7. The blood hasn't dried in southern Israel. They're still rounding up terrorists, and these guys are going to be there calling for the ethnic cleansing of Israel, just spewing hatred. And so I thought, well, someone's got to show up and actually provide a bit of an alternate voice and shine a spotlight so the rest of Sydney sees this hatred. So I phoned the police and I said, this is what I'm planning to do. They said, don't come down, we can't guarantee your safety, and if you try and do anything like that, like if you wave an Israeli flag, we'll arrest you for your own safety. So I thought, bugger that.
For your own safety.
Yeah, well, because it's easier to move on the Jew than to move on a mob. So, which is wrong. So I went down and stood on the steps of the cathedral in my clerical shirt, and the mob started going and they were chanting a whole bunch of stuff. I heard a small group of guys start saying, kill the Jews. But at that point I thought, I've had enough. Pulled out an Israeli flag, waved the flag. All the eyes turned on me, and then I got chased out of the square by a bunch of guys all dressed up and masked, threatening to slit my throat like this. So I ran up Bathurst Street and hid behind a police van. And then the police dispersed the guys who were chasing me, and then they marched from there down to the Opera House, and that's where we saw those, genuinely awful images of flares and trampling on the Israeli flag, trampling on the Australian flag, chants of gas the Jews, where's the Jews, and so on. So yeah, I did that because I wanted the world to see that this is un-Australian, that as citizens we have a right to be in our own city, and as a Jew, my mum's a Jew, as a Jew, I'm not going to be told to stay out of my own city because we want to appease a bunch of thugs.
To put into context for people, October 9, the Israeli operation hadn't started.
No, not a bomb had been dropped, not a soldier had gone in. They were still hunting down terrorists in southern Israel. So the only rationale for this was just pure hatred of Jewish people, hatred of Israel, hatred of the Jews, hatred of Western culture. It was extraordinary. And I think for me, the idea that hatred is now normalized. So we see that every week on our streets around the Western world, and now we see it as a celebration of resistance against oppression, when you go, no, it's just ugly hatred of Jews and of Western civilization.
And since then, so you certainly haven't slowed down. It seems like even the mob chasing you out of Sydney didn't stop you. What have you been up to, and why do you continue?
Well, I've co-founded a group called Never Again Is Now, where we are mobilizing the Christian and the secular Australian community to stand up and push back the hate that we see from radical Islam and the hatred from the radical left, and say, this is un-Australian, and we need to mobilize the broad Christian community to stand with and for the Jewish community.
And how have you found that mobilizing of the Christian community?
Look, It's hard. It's hard. I've found the involvement with the Jewish community wonderful. It's like I'm like this physical bridge trying to do something that really hasn't been done before. And it's a bit of my crazy background, you know, Jewish and Christian, and my brother was Muslim, so I get all of that. I think a lot of Christians are scared, they're apathetic, they hope it'll be someone else's problem. But most people, when I say to them, do you know that there's only 100,000 Jews in Australia? And do you know that Jews in Australia now feel scared in their own city, and they don't want to, you know, send their kids to school in their Jewish school uniforms? They wear civilian clothes to school and then change in their uniforms. And do you think that's right? Most Christians go, no, that's terrible, that shouldn't happen. So it's really about educating them about the experience of being Jewish in Australia now, and then going, is this the kind of country you want to live in, where one group can intimidate and threaten and be allowed to intimidate and threaten another group on the basis of race and under the guise of what's happening in another part of the world? So we're just doing that. We organised a massive event called Never Again Is Now. Had 12,000 people out in Sydney on the 12th of Feb. It was amazing. We had an event in Adelaide last week. We're planning Melbourne for May, Brisbane, Perth, and then we'll just see. We want to create a whole movement to renew our culture, push back the hate, mate.
And when you gauge it, do you feel like from when you started this project, this campaign, Never Again, do you feel like you're getting somewhere, or is this an uphill battle?
That's a very good question. I don't know. We're having lots of conversations. So here's how I approach life. I go, I am not responsible for the outcomes. All I can do is take the action in the moment that I believe is right. So we're doing what we believe is right, and we can't control the outcomes. The level of propaganda funded by Iran and Qatar, flooding social media, flooding the mainstream media, this narrative of of Israel as the oppressor, and the endless footage of devastation in Gaza, some of which is true and tragic, some of which is constructed and false. That is making it hard. That's not going away anytime soon. So it is an uphill battle. But that's okay. So someone said, what if you lose? I go, well, man, I'm going down swinging. I can't control the outcomes. It's like you said in your talk earlier, which was great, by the way. Like, it's not an option for Israel to lose. Like, you go, no, this is an existential battle. It's just not an option. And it's not an option in Australia for us to cede our streets to radical Islam and to say, we don't mind if Jews are persecuted in this country. It's just not an option.
Finally, you're obviously a pastor in the Anglican Church. How do you feel their response has been? And because I do believe there are a few Anglicans that are actually campaigning on the other side of this.
More than a few. So the Anglican Church is a broad church, and there are people with a wide variety of views. And I would say, unfortunately, not all of them agree with me. And in fact, some are strongly supportive of the alternate view.
Why are so many Christians falling for it now? Like, if you look at the Middle East, you would think...
It's insane, isn't it? Like, you just go, mate, if I had an answer to that, maybe I could address it. I think there's a broad cultural narrative that they've been brought up in. Frantz Fanon, the French-Algerian theorist, who popularized this, he was a psychoanalyst, popularized the idea of the oppressor narrative, and any liberation from colonization requires violence. And so the Christians have bought, and Christians, like Jesus is all about the underdog and supporting people, and so there's a good heart. There's a part of the motive for this is, we want to support people who are being oppressed. But then they've layered this on with this self-loathing. We're all white colonialists, we're guilty of this, we hate ourselves, we're ashamed of our culture, even though we're Christian, and then they are just, it's like they're primed by what they've been brought up with to believe this stuff. It's really concerning, because it's just not true. That's the thing. I go, it's not true, man. And we should value the truth. So, like, if Israel commits war crimes, then Israel's military should be held to account, 100%. If Bibi's decisions are dumb, he'll be held to account. Like, he'll get voted out, possibly, unlike Hamas, will just kill their opponents, right? Yeah. So it's a democracy, we hold it to account, but you've got to pursue the truth without fear or favor. And I don't know, man. So it's very concerning. I sometimes am full of despair at the state of our culture. I'm like, oh my goodness. But go down swinging, man. We can't give up. It's not an option.
If you enjoyed this discussion as much as I did, make sure to like, comment, but most importantly, share it far and wide, because the internet right now is full of negativity where we need some of your power. And then head over to followavi.com, make sure to subscribe to the mailing list and across all social media, just in case the platform you're watching this on right now turns on good people like, what am I allowed to call you? Father? No, not
Mark,
father.
just Mark. Just Mark. Rabbi.
Rabbi. The Jewish rabbi. Followavi.com.